Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 5, Confucius, from the Adepts in the Eastern Esoteric Tradition, by Manly Palmer Hall, Part 3, The Sages of China. Confucius. Ching-tsai, the mother of Confucius, was a girl of 17, and her husband was in his 70th year at the time of their marriage. In the early legendary account, Ching-tsai, fearing that she should not have a son because of the great age of her husband, made regular journeys to a nearby hill where she prayed for the assistance of heaven. There is also a story that the aged husband and his young wife performed ancient rituals together, asking the intercession of the gods in a secluded place on the side of Mount Mi. When Ching-tsai ascended the hill to perform the sacred ceremony, the leaves of trees and plants stood erect, and on her return they bent over to pay her homage. On the night that she returned from these holy and ancient rites, she had a dream in which a black deity appeared to her, saying, "You shall have a son, a sage, and you must bring him forth in a hollow mulberry tree." One day during her pregnancy, Ching-tsai passed into a state of trance, and in her vision she saw 5 ancient men in the hall of her house. These patriarchs referred to themselves as the essences of the 5 planets, and they led in their midst an animal resembling a small cow with 1 horn and covered with scales like a dragon. This strange creature knelt before Ching-tsai and cast forth from its mouth a tablet of jade on which was the inscription, "The son of the essence of water shall succeed to the decaying Cho and be a throneless king." In her dream or reverie, Ching-tsai tied a piece of embroidered ribbon around the single horn of the qilin or unicorn, and the vision disappeared. As the time drew near for Ching-tsai to bear her child, she asked her husband if there was any place in the vicinity called the hollow mulberry tree. He said that there was a small dry cave which went by that name on the south side of a hill. She then stated that she wished to be confined in this cave. When her husband expressed surprise, she told of her dream, and he immediately made the necessary arrangements. On the night when the child was born, 2 dragons appeared in the air and kept vigil on the right and left of the hill, and 2 spirit ladies hovered above the cave, pouring out fragrant odors as though to bathe the mother and child. Immediately after the birth occurred, a spring of clear water, warm and fragrant, bubbled up from the floor of the dry cave. But as soon as the child had been bathed, the spring dried away and was not seen again. There is a celebrated series of pictures setting forth the principal incidents in the life of Confucius. These are based upon tablets in the Temple of Chufu in Shantung. 3 illustrations from this series are concerned with the miraculous occurrences which accompanied the birth of Confucius. The first of these shows the 5 old men and the qilin, as described in Ching-tsai's vision. The second rubbing shows the roof of the house of Shu Liang-he at the time of the birth of the sage. 2 dragons surrounded by clouds hover over the ridgepole, and nearby are the 5 ancient ones who descended from the sky to be present at the happy occurrence. In this series of drawings, it is implied that Confucius was born in the family residence rather than in the mountain cave. The third picture shows 5 heavenly musicians playing their instruments in the sky over the birthplace of the uncrowned king. Immediately after her son was born, Ching-tsai heard this celestial music, and a voice from space said, "Heaven influenced the birth of the holy child." Confucius is said to have been born with the 49 marks of a noble and excellent body, and on his breast appeared the words, "The charm of making ceremonies and setting the world in order." The mythical creatures which attended the birth of Confucius suggest a brief summary of this phase of Chinese metaphysical symbolism. The qilin is the Chinese equivalent of the unicorn. The male of the species is called qi and the female lin. The combination of these 2 terms gives the generic name for this creature, the chitin in Japanese, kirin. The unicorn is said to have had the body of a cow or deer covered with scales of 5 colors. It had the tail of an ox and the hooves of a horse, and there was 1 soft horn growing from the center of its head. In Chinese mythology, several mythical animals play important parts. The qilin is the lord of quadrupeds, the dragon presides over reptiles and scaly creatures, and the phoenix is sovereign among the birds. Here again, Chinese symbolism mingles with that of many other nations. Dragon lore is almost universally distributed. The unicorn appears in the legendary of many peoples, And the phoenix, the bird of immortality, was well known to the Egyptians and Romans and is found among the North American Indians, the Mayas, and the Aztecs. These creatures have always been associated with heroic persons, and their appearances as omens had more than superficial meaning. All three, for example, appear among the curious designs of European alchemy, and on a psychological level have been explained and interpreted by Jung in his Psychology and Alchemy. He noted that the phoenix is known in early Christian art as equivalent to the dove, representing the third person of the Trinity. The Qilin eats no mortal food and is said to avoid walking on growing grass. The phoenix is native only to the mysterious land of the sages, and the Chinese believe that it originated in the remote wastes of the Gobi Desert. The dragon, long accepted as a symbol of imperial authority in China, lived in all elements and could make itself invisible at will. Although a ferocious appearance, it was usually associated with good fortune in the Chinese mind. By the reference of Confucius, who likened the dragon to the mind of Lao Tse, it evidently also signified true wisdom and even Tao itself. It is believed that the Hebrew word reem, as it occurs in the Bible, should be translated unicorn. Aristotle mentions the unicorn, and Pliny describes a fierce animal called the monoceros, which is almost identical with the Qilin. In his Gallic Wars, Caesar speaks of a creature shaped like a stag, with one horn projecting from the center of its forehead. It has been suggested scientifically that records about the unicorn are so numerous that such creatures might actually exist or have existed as the result of hybridization. In any event, they have always been regarded as extremely rare and have seldom been seen by mortals. If, as the alchemists suggested, the single horn represents the one-pointedness of the human will, this elusive animal might well be considered as an appropriate symbol of the immortal or adept. Like these fabled sages, and also like the very principles of truth which they taught, the unicorn can neither be tamed nor captured, but will follow docilely those of perfect faith and gentleness. The Qilin is not a ferocious animal, but it will defend its liberty with its life. Whatever the original meaning may have been, the unicorn, phoenix, and dragon are represented on most monuments associated with the esoteric tradition. These symbolic creatures, therefore, have become seals or landmark of secret societies which have taught the adept tradition, and references to them, either pictorial or literary, are found wherever temples of the old mystery rites are known to have been located. They are the protectors of the god-men and accompany the messengers of heaven. About a year before his death, Confucius learned that hunters had slain a strange creature in the forest. The sage immediately investigated the report and, seeing the animal, declared it to be the Qilin. He was deeply moved, for he said that its death was an omen of his own departure and announced the decline of virtue among men. In terms of historical orientation, Confucius was born about the time of the death of Nebuchadnezzar, when Cyrus became king of Persia. The event was considered important, and the Duke of Lu sent congratulations. There had been prophecies that a great sage was to be born, and the exact date of his appearance was announced by seers and sages of previous generations. Werner mentions a legend that Confucius was a reincarnation of Wen Cheng, who lived during the Zhou dynasty, 1154 to 1122 BC. Wen was greatly honored as a teacher and was finally canonized under the impressive title Celestial and highly honored head of the 9 orbs of the heavens, voice of the thunder and regulator of the universe. Confucius was only 3 years old when his father died, and his early training was entrusted to his mother's care. The strong spirit of veneration which marked the career of this sage was due in large measure to the maternal guidance which directed his early life. Even as a very young boy, he exhibited extraordinary love of learning and a profound respect for the ancient laws of his people. At the age of 17, he was appointed inspector of the corn marts, where he energetically repressed fraud and dishonesty. Later, he was appointed inspector general of pastures and flocks, a position which he occupied with such wisdom and skill that there was an immediate and notable improvement in the condition of his people. The mother of Confucius died in his 23rd year, and this circumstance established him in his philosophical career. There was an ancient but then almost forgotten law among the Chinese, which obligated a man in public office to resign from all official duties at the death of either parent. There were also regulations traceable to venerable antiquity bearing upon the solemnity and splendor of the burial services of a father or mother. Confucius carefully fulfilled all these traditional requirements and revived customs which have continued in practice until the present time. After the funeral, Confucius returned to his house and remained in solitude for the prescribed 3 years. He dedicated this time as a period of mourning, but in the spirit of the highest admiration for his mother, he devoted his energies to reflection and philosophical studies as an enduring monument to her memory. After he had completed his ritual for the dead, Confucius immediately sought opportunity to instruct his countrymen. He traveled through the various states of the empire and gained considerable reputation as teacher and reformer. At one time, his followers included 500 mandarins, and it has been emphasized that he appealed strongly to persons with heavy responsibilities and sincere concern for the improvement of the state. It has been said that his philosophy was ethical rather than religious, but so broad a statement must be accepted with reservations. While living at Lu, Confucius labored industriously in preparing revisions and abridgments of the ancient literature of his country. Therefore, it cannot be said that he was opposed to or inclined to neglect the spiritual convictions of the ancient Chinese. Dr. Legge, who has done so masterful a study of the Confucian literature, appears to have been prejudiced against the attitude of Confucius on religious questions. Dr. Legge has gone so far as to say that Confucius was unreligious, if not atheistic. It is hard, however, to reconcile such a statement with the words of the Master, who said, "He who offends against heaven has none to whom he can pray." The use of the term heaven as a synonym for deity has always been broadly accepted in China and can only imply a philosophical concept of deity, entirely reverent but philosophical rather than theological. Dr. Legge also charged Confucius with an insufficient belief in a future life. This would be virtually impossible for a man who devoted his career to the restoration and preservation of the ancient culture of China. In one place, the Master said that spirits do not hear oaths or obligations which are not voluntary. His devotion to the I Ching should rescue his memory from any stigma of materialism. He also carefully performed all rites proper to the divinities and the deceased ancestors, assuming them to be present at such ceremonies. It is also true that though Confucius was a consistent theist and believed in the immortality of man, his principal purpose was the attainment of perfect virtue in the present life. He held that such a course assured the future state and was most immediately necessary. More than 500 years before the birth of Jesus, Confucius stated the golden rule: "What I do not wish men to do to me, I also wish not to do to them." Confucius spoke not only to princes and rulers, but to the most simple and humble of men. In the cultivation of the great learning, he advocated 7 steps by which the human being can ascend to a superior state. These are the investigation of things, the completion of knowledge, the sincerity of the thoughts, the rectifying of the heart, the cultivation of the person, the regulation of the family, and the government of the state. Such a code, though it may not be theological, can scarcely be assailed as lacking in religious implications. Confucius receiving a report concerning the wise administration of the state of Wei from the Shantung tablets. The Master said, "A youth when at home should be filial and abroad respectful to his elders. He should be earnest and truthful. He should overflow in love to all and cultivate the friendship of the good. When he has time and opportunity, after the performance of these things, he should employ them in polite studies." The Master said, "He who exercises government by means of his virtue may be compared to the North Polar Star, which keeps its place and all the stars turn toward it." The Master said, "At 15 I had my mind bent on learning. At 30 I stood firm. At 40 I had no doubts. At 50 I knew the decrees of heaven. At 60 my ear was an obedient organ for the reception of truth. At 70 I could follow what my heart desired without transgressing what was right." The Master said, "The superior man is Catholic and not partisan. The mean man is a partisan and not Catholic." The Master said, Learning without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. Although many princes honored Confucius, it became increasingly obvious to him that the essential principles of his doctrine would not be generally accepted in his own time. He therefore finally retired in his 67th year to his own state of Lu, where he established a school which gained considerable distinction. He chose to do this rather than to follow the suggestion of certain of his disciples who recommended that he retire to some distant mountainous place and become a recluse. He decided to remain in the world as a teacher and establish a formal system of instruction, defending his decision with the following words: "But I am a man, and cannot exclude myself from the society of men to consort with wild beasts. As bad as the times are, I shall do all that I can to induce the people to return to habits of reason and virtue, for it is in the exercise of these cardinal principles of our nature alone that we are able to find personal happiness, national contentment, and harmony. If all men would earnestly uphold the dignity of reason and follow in the pathway of virtue, they would require no instruction from myself or others to enable them to find the escutcheon of wisdom or that felicity of life which is so much sought after. It is the duty of every man to first perfect himself, and then to aid in the work of perfecting others. Human nature is our inheritance. It comes to us as a divine gift, yet it is only in the complete subjugation of its compromising qualities that we are enabled to find peace of mind, social joy, and freedom." Confucius, profoundly agitated at the death of the Qilin, from the Shantung tablets. The students of Confucius numbered over 3,000, and of these, 72 were so outstanding that he regarded them as his personal disciples. The life of the master was saddened by the death of 2 of his disciples. In the year 481 BC, the incident involving the Qilin occurred. Some accounts state that the strange animal was captured during a hunting excursion, and others say that the creature was found by wood-gatherers. As it could not be identified, Confucius was asked to examine it. He immediately recognized it as a lin, and legends affirm that it still bore on its horn the ribbon which had been placed there by the mother of the sage before his birth. Confucius was profoundly affected and cried out, "For whom have you come?" Then he added quietly, "The course of my doctrines is run." Early in the year 479 BC, Confucius stood by the door of his house, chanting in a low voice, "The great mountain must crumble, the strong beam must break, and the wise man wither away like a plant." Among his last utterances is that recorded in the Li Chi 2, section 1, 220. "I'm a man of yin, and last night I dreamt that I was sitting with offerings before me between the 2 pillars. No intelligent monarch arises. There is no one in the kingdom that will make me his master. My time has come to die." He then retired to his house and expired 7 days later. At the end, the master passed in complete tranquility. He indicated no apprehension, nor did he ask or require any consolation. In death, there was no change in his expression. He simply appeared to sleep. It is assumed, however, that his heart was saddened by the conviction that he had failed. If so, he accepted this also as according to the way of heaven. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.